Nobody move or I'll shoot! The voice cracked through the diner like a gunshot itself, sending forks clattering against plates and hearts pounding against ribs. A black pistol waved erratically in the trembling hands of a masked intruder, his eyes wide with desperation, his finger twitching far too close to the trigger. Patrons froze mid-breath, the cozy chatter of the Boston diner collapsing into suffocating silence. In that suspended moment, fear was supposed to rule the room. People were meant to scream, to beg, to crumble, but one woman didn't. Elena Ramirez, a young waitress in a faded blue uniform, stood as if carved from stone. No trembling, no pleading, no collapse. Instead, she set the stack of dirty plates in her arms into the nearest table, with deliberate calm, the clink of porcelain impossibly loud in the silence. Then, with steady hands, she raised her palms in surrender and spoke, not to save herself, but to steady everyone else. "It's okay," she said softly, her voice slicing through the panic like a lifeline. "He's just here for the money. Stay calm. No one's going to get hurt." The masked man's aim faltered, caught off guard by her composure. An old woman whimpered in the booth, and Elena's eyes locked on her without flinching. "Mrs. Whitmore, breathe with me," she coaxed gently. Somehow, impossibly, the room listened. Terror bent to her will, and in the far corner of the diner, hidden in shadows, billionaire Richard Grant watched every second with razor-sharp focus. He had seen boardrooms crumble under less pressure, politicians unravel with one tough question. But this waitress was commanding a crisis with more poise than CEOs he paid millions. He leaned forward, realizing with a jolt that his life was about to change, because what she did next would leave him no choice but to act. The bell above the diner's door had chimed like it always did, a cheerful sound that felt out of place in the chaotic heartbeat of Boston. Outside, the city roared with honking horns, flashing sirens, and the endless grind of ambition. Inside, however, the diner clung to its identity, a place where cracked red vinyl booths and greasy menus told stories of decades gone by. The smell of burnt coffee and frying bacon lingered in the air, stubborn and familiar. At the far corner, in a booth nearly swallowed by shadows, sat Richard Grant. To anyone glancing his way, he was just another sharply dressed man in a charcoal suit. They could never guess the truth, that the watch on his wrist was worth more than the entire diner building, or that this man controlled skyscrapers, real estate empires, and billions in private equity. Richard Grant wasn't simply wealthy, he was feared, a titan whose reputation for ruthlessness was whispered in boardrooms like a cautionary tale. And yet here he sat, once a month, picking at congealed eggs and stale toast, honoring a ritual he had inherited from his late wife Clara. She had loved these places, the ones with soul and imperfection. For her, they were authentic. For him, they were inefficient, dirty beneath him. Still, he came because Clara had believed in them, and he couldn't quite let go. Richard's eyes swept the diner with cold detachment, a college student buried in a textbook, a couple locked in an argument, a truck driver devouring a burger. Predictable. Boring. Then his gaze landed on her. Elena Ramirez moved between tables with the quiet grace of someone who had been carrying more weight than her frame should bear. Her uniform was clean but frayed, her eyes ringed with exhaustion. She remembered every order, every allergy, every small detail that kept her fragile world in balance. But behind that focus was a storm she carried silently. 2 years ago, her younger sister Sophia had been diagnosed with cystic fibrosis. The disease had torn Elena's future apart, forcing her to abandon her nursing program one semester short of graduation, forcing her to trade textbooks for double shifts and dreams for bills. Every tip, every hour, every ache in her feet was a currency she traded for Sophia's medication, treatments, and hope. To Elena, the diner wasn't just a job, it was survival. Richard saw her refill an elderly woman's coffee with a soft smile, calm a tense couple with a few steady words, pick up a dropped fork for a little boy as if she had all the time in the world. No fake cheerfulness, no empty charm, just quiet dignity. He almost dismissed it as nothing, just another face in his endless carousel of forgettable days. But a flicker of curiosity lingered, an unfamiliar sensation for a man who thought he had seen everything. He didn't yet know that this waitress, who seemed so small against the backdrop of a merciless city, was about to alter his carefully constructed world forever. The cheerful jingle of the diner's bell shattered into something violent as the door was thrown open. Two men stumbled in, moving with the twitchy desperation of cornered animals. One wore a ski mask, the other a gray hoodie pulled low, but it wasn't their appearance that froze the room. It was the black pistol shaking in the masked man's hand. "Everybody down! Empty the register now!" His voice cracked with raw panic, ricocheting off the chrome and tile. Plates slipped from trembling hands. A college student dropped his textbook with a loud thud, the sound echoing like a warning. The truck driver raised his arms, his burger half-eaten, his eyes wide. Fear spread through the room like fire in dry grass. At the counter, Mr. Harris, the balding diner owner, was shoved against the milkshake machine as the man in the hoodie vaulted clumsily over, grabbing for the register. The gunman's eyes darted wildly, searching for control he didn't truly have. That's when they landed on Elena Ramirez. She stood in the middle of the dining floor, a stack of dirty plates balanced in her hands, trapped halfway between safety and danger. The muzzle of the pistol swung toward her, the tremor in the gunman's hand magnifying the risk. "You, on the floor, now!" he barked, his voice shrill, his fear leaking into every syllable. Time slowed for Richard Grant. His instincts, honed in boardrooms, where billions balanced on a word, calculated swiftly. Two assailants, one gun, amateur, panicked, high probability of violence through accident, not intent. He slid his hand toward his phone, ready to press the emergency alert wired to his private security team. But then he froze. Not because of the gunman, but because of her. Elena didn't scream. She didn't collapse. Slowly, deliberately, she set the plates on the nearest table, the clink of ceramic shockingly loud in the paralyzed silence. Then she lifted her hands, palms open, voice steady. "Okay," she said softly, the calm threading through the air like a balm. "It's all right. He's getting the money. No one needs to get hurt." Her eyes locked on the gunman's. Not defiant, not pleading, but steady, as if she saw not a monster, but a frightened man making a terrible mistake. Somewhere in the back booth, Mrs. Whitmore whimpered, her frail body trembling. The gunman's head snapped toward the sound, panic spiking his voice. "Shut her up! I swear I'll—" His words fractured, the pistol jerking dangerously. But Elena's voice cut through the chaos, never rising, never shaking. "Mrs. Whitmore, look at me," she urged, still holding the robber's gaze. "Just breathe with me. Deep breaths. It'll be over soon." Her tone was not command, not fear. It was reassurance. Against all odds, the old woman's sobs softened, her shaky inhales steadier. The room bent toward Elena's composure. The masked man faltered, confusion flickering in his eyes. For a heartbeat, Richard saw it too, a glimmer of shame breaking through the haze of fear. Then, with the bags stuffed full of cash, the man in the hoodie hissed, "Let's go!" The gunman backed away, his weapon still wavering, then bolted through the door. In seconds, they vanished into the chaos of the city. Silence collapsed into sobs, the collective exhale of survival. Mr. Harris slumped onto a stool, his chest heaving. Patrons clutched one another, adrenaline draining into relief. And through it all, Elena moved like a lighthouse after a storm, guiding the shaken back to calm. Richard hadn't moved a muscle. His phone lay untouched. He realized he hadn't needed it. The crisis had been managed. Not by security, not by force, but by the unshakable calm of a waitress who had faced down a gun and refused to break. And for the first time in years, Richard Grant felt something unexpected stir in him. Awe. When the chaos ebbed and the police sirens finally painted the night with their wailing blue and red. Elena Ramirez returned to her work as if normalcy could stitch the broken moment back together. She brought Richard Grant his check, her hand trembling only now that the danger had passed. "I'm sorry about your meal, sir," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "It's on the house." Richard studied her, really studied her. The exhaustion in her eyes, the frayed seams of her uniform, and the steel hidden deep within. Instead of writing on the slip, he reached into his wallet, pulled out a neat stack of bills, and placed it on the table. 20 crisp hundreds. On top of them, a plain white business card. His voice was low, almost gravel. That wasn't fearlessness. That was management. Very impressive. Before she could answer, he was gone, leaving behind $2,000 in a card that seemed to hum with possibility and danger all at once. For 3 days, the card haunted Elena. On her kitchen counter, it glared at her every time she counted the money, every time she paid Sophia's prescriptions, every time she glanced at the air purifier she had finally been able to buy. Richard Grant, Finch Enterprises, a private number. Men like him didn't give charity. Men like him made investments. Was she the investment, or was she the gamble? Sophia's small voice broke her indecision. Call him, Elena. Maybe he wants to help more. On the fourth day, Elena dialed. A single word answered. Grant. His voice was as steady as it had been in the diner. Mr. Grant, this is Elena Ramirez from the other night. I know who you are. I was beginning to think my judgment was flawed. Report to Finch Plaza, 88th floor tomorrow. 9 a.m., don't be late. The line went dead. The next morning, Elena stepped into the monolithic tower of Finch Enterprises, her black skirt and iron blouse making her feel like an imposter among the tailored Armani suits. The elevator rose endlessly until it opened onto the 88th floor, a world of polished mahogany, hushed voices, and cold ambition. Richard's office stretched like a kingdom, walls of glass overlooking a city that seemed both distant and small. He didn't waste time. The 2000 was payment for entertainment, he said bluntly. Watching you handle that situation was the most interesting thing I've seen in years. You have skills I can't teach. Clarity under pressure. I want you here, reporting directly to me as Special Projects Coordinator. Elena blinked, stunned. Mr. Grant, I'm a waitress. I didn't even finish nursing school. I'm not qualified for this. Richard leaned forward, eyes sharp. Your background is why I want you. Nursing teaches triage, diagnosis, control under chaos. That's business. That's survival. You don't see a problem. You see the patient, the solution, the path forward. I can teach numbers. I can't teach instinct. He slid an offer letter across the desk. The salary made her vision blur. The benefits promised Sophia a future. But his final words cut deeper than any promise. Loyalty and discretion. Fail me once, you're gone. Her acceptance was like stepping off a cliff. By Monday, Elena had an office, a glass cube beside Richard's, both an honor and a fishbowl. But the whispers came immediately. That's her, the waitress. Grant must have lost his mind. The sharpest sneer belonged to Victor Hale, head of mergers and acquisitions. Tall, perfectly groomed, with a smile that dripped disdain, he leaned against her doorframe on her second day. Welcome to the team, he said, voice heavy with sarcasm. Quite the story. 1-minute coffee refills, the next, executive suite. If you ever need help understanding EBITDA, do let me know. His eyes gleamed with condescension. Elena smiled politely. Thank you, Mr. Hale. I learned quickly. But behind that polite dismissal, Victor seethed. To him, her presence was an insult, a blot on the meritocracy he believed he owned. Richard Grant's golden boy had been upstaged by a nobody from a diner. And in Victor's world, that was unforgivable. From that moment, his mission crystallized. Elena Ramirez would not survive on the 88th floor. He would see to it personally. Elena approached her first challenge the way she had handled crises at the diner, by observing, listening, and finding the thread no one else noticed. Richard Grant handed her the Sterling Tower dispute, a massive skyscraper project stalled by one holdout, Mrs. Langford, a 78-year-old retired teacher who refused to abandon her aging tenement. Victor Hale had tried intimidation, sending lawyers with thicker contracts and sharper threats, but each attempt only hardened the woman's resolve and invited unwanted media attention. Elena arrived not with papers, but with a lemon tart, recalling a neighborhood article about Mrs. Langford's baking competition years ago. Over tea, she asked about her late husband, the fireplace he had built with his own hands, the rose bush she planted when her son went off to college. They think it's the bricks I'm fighting for, the old woman said, her eyes sharp with tears. But it's the memories. Elena leaned forward and answered softly, then let's save the memories, not the bricks. She proposed transforming the tower's public park into the Robert Langford Memorial Garden, moving the rose bush as its centerpiece, and funding a literacy endowment in her name. The old woman's stern gaze melted. Within a day, she signed. When Elena presented the solution, Richard's approving nod was subtle but meaningful, while Victor's fury burned silently across his face. Her next test came at the docks, where Tommy Callahan, a tough union leader, had crushed Finch's lawyers. Instead of contracts, Elena met him in his favorite tavern, acknowledging his family's legacy and proposing retraining programs that would elevate his men into managing the very machines threatening their jobs. Callahan grunted, then laughed, extending his hand. Deal! Word spread quickly. Richard Grant's Finch whisperer could do what others couldn't, calm storms before they broke. Elena's salary transformed her life. Sophia entered a clinical trial, and for the first time, hope felt like more than a dream. But her success was Victor's humiliation. His polished Ivy League credentials, his carefully groomed rise, all diminished by a waitress with no pedigree. Every approving glance Richard gave her felt like a dagger in his pride. Desperation curdled into hatred, and hatred into obsession. If he couldn't break her present, he would corrupt her past. He hired Mr. Dwyer, a ruthless investigator, instructing him to dig until he found something. Weeks passed with nothing. Elena's record was painfully clean. Then Dwyer discovered a fracture. One of the robbers from the diner, Eddie Malone, had been arrested. His weekly visitor? His brother Patrick Malone, a quiet analyst employed at Finch Enterprises. Worse, Patrick worked directly under Victor. At first, Victor dismissed it, but Dwyer pressed further. Weeks before the robbery, Patrick had been flagged by auditors for discrepancies in a logistics deal. The file reached Victor's desk. He had cleared it in haste, unwilling to stall a lucrative acquisition. 2 days later, Patrick wired $5,000 to his brother's girlfriend. That money had likely fueled the robbery. Suddenly, Victor saw the trap snapping shut around him. The crime that had introduced Elena to Richard traced back to him. His carelessness, his ambition. If exposed, it would not be Elena who fell, but Victor. Meanwhile, Elena sifted through files late one night when her eyes froze on a familiar face. Patrick Malone. His weak chin, his haunted gaze mirrored the man in the diner's gray hoodie. Recognition hit like lightning. The pieces aligned. The robbery, the cover-up, the transfer. Victor's hand approving it all. It wasn't coincidence. It was a web. She lifted her gaze through the glass wall of her office. Across the floor where Victor Hale leaned casually against his desk, smirking like a predator. For the first time, Elena felt the ground tremble beneath her feet. Not from fear, but from the knowledge that she now held a secret powerful enough to burn the 88th floor to the ground. Elena knew the truth alone was not enough. She needed proof so undeniable that even Victor Hale's silver tongue could not twist it, and her instincts led her to the very charity Victor had championed with relentless zeal. A glossy nonprofit called Future Forward that looked perfect on paper but rang hollow to her trained senses. So she spent nights combing through documents, visiting supposed beneficiaries, and what she found was rot beneath the polish. Community centers starved of funds, programs described in brochures that didn't exist, a hollow shell designed to funnel corporate donations into private pockets. And when she dug deeper into payment records, she uncovered the name that sealed Victor's fate. The largest payments flowed to a boutique PR firm secretly owned by Caroline Vance, Victor's girlfriend, proof that his championed charity was a self-enrichment scheme. With her evidence assembled, Elena requested a boardroom meeting, copying Victor on the email, ensuring he could not escape the trap, and when the day came, she walked into the vast mahogany chamber, carrying not fear but quiet resolve. Victor smirked as she set up her files, whispering with venom, "Don't worry, I'll back you up if you stumble." But his confidence wavered as Richard Grant entered, his presence freezing the room into silence, and gestured for her to begin. Elena's voice was steady as she unveiled the financial webs of Future Forward, each slide peeling away layers of deceit until the final blow revealed Caroline's company as the prime recipient of funds. The color drained from Victor's face as murmurs rippled through the executives. But still he spat, "This is a smear. My personal life is irrelevant." Richard's icy glare silenced him, and he ordered, "Continue, Miss Ramirez." With unflinching calm, Elena laid out the darker truth, projecting side by side the faces of Eddie and Patrick Malone, connecting the flagged audit Victor had buried, the wire transfer, and the robbery that had thrust her into this company. "I am not claiming Mr. Hale orchestrated the crime," she declared, her gaze locked on Richard's. "But his ambition blinded him to a serious breach. His negligence introduced criminal ties into Finch Enterprises. And while concealing this, he has simultaneously exploited the Finch Foundation for personal gain. He is not just reckless. He is the single greatest risk on this floor." The room went silent as stone, every breath suspended, and Richard turned his gaze on Victor, his voice deceptively soft. "Is there anything in this presentation that is factually inaccurate?" Trapped, Victor stammered, sweat beating at his temple. "It's complicated," but Richard cut him off with a low growl that carried the weight of final judgment. "No, it's remarkably simple. Get your things. Security will escort you out. You're finished here." The golden boy's face collapsed into shock as guards appeared at the door, and with each step of his disgraceful exit, the power he had clung to for years bled away, leaving only silence in his wake. Richard then turned back to Elena, his expression unreadable, but his eyes glinting with respect as he said, "You didn't just identify a problem. You brought proof, a solution, and clarity. The Finch Foundation needs leadership with vision. The position of president is yours." The words hung in the air like thunder. The waitress who had once calmed a gunman now elevated to the helm of one of the most powerful philanthropic arms in the country. And as she accepted with a steady nod, she understood that she had not merely survived Victor's schemes. She had risen above them, and justice had not only been served, it had been transformed into opportunity. From the corner booth of a rundown diner to the 88th floor of a glass tower, Elena Ramirez's journey seemed impossible. Yet as she settled into her new office overlooking the city skyline, it felt less like luck and more like destiny forged by grit and love. With her promotion, she launched Project Nightingale, a scholarship fund designed to help students from low-income families finish nursing and healthcare degrees cut short by hardship, a direct echo of the life she herself had once lost. Reporters clamored for interviews. Headlines celebrated the Waitress-turned-foundation president. But Elena remained grounded, visiting community centers in person, speaking to families, and ensuring funds reached real people rather than glossy brochures. At home, Sophia's laughter returned, her cheeks pink with new health, as a cutting-edge treatment gave her a future once thought impossible, and their small apartment gave way to a brighter home filled with light, books, and the hum of hope rather than despair. Richard Grant, once the ruthless billionaire recluse, found himself changed in ways he hadn't anticipated. He stopped by Elena's office one evening, staring at the plans spread across her desk, his gruff tone softened. "You're not just running this foundation," he murmured. "You're rebuilding it from the ground up." Elena smiled gently, replying, "You taught me to look for the illness in a system. I'm just applying triage where it matters most." For the first time in years, Richard looked out at the city lights not as commodities to be bought and sold, but as lives with stories worth saving. The man who had once measured his worth in towers and transactions now realized his most valuable acquisition was a woman who had taught him the strength of empathy. And for Elena, the lesson was simple, yet profound. Strength wasn't loud, wealth wasn't everything, and true courage often wore the quiet face of love. The waitress who had once balanced plates to pay for medicine now balanced hope for thousands. And the billionaire who had once sought only profit had discovered the priceless return of investing in human potential. Their lives, bound together by one violent night and a single act of calm, had transformed into a story of redemption, resilience, and renewal. And as Elena looked at Sophia sleeping peacefully that night, her chest rising steadily, she whispered a silent vow that their story would be proof for the world that no one should ever underestimate the hidden power in ordinary people. What about you? Do you believe Richard's decision to hire her was a reckless gamble or a stroke of genius? Let us know in the comments, share this story with someone who needs a reminder of hope, and don't forget to subscribe for more unforgettable journeys.